we're going to look at the difference between research problems, research questions, and hypothesis formation, all of which are extremely important when we're designing our research. If we're not clear on these items, we're not going to design the right type of research, and we won't find solutions to the problems that we're looking at. Now, let's start off with the idea of research problem. A research problem is a problem for which you want to find a solution through research. You think that there's a solution out there, but we don't have the information yet that we need to solve that problem. So, for example, I'm going to choose something from my life. People are anxious in stats classes. I teach stats several times a year, and people tend to be really afraid in stats class. And when you're afraid, you're kind of defensive, you're a little closed-minded, and you're not too 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 happy. So that would be a way of dealing with that. Or that's something that I want to reduce is I don't want people to be anxious. So that's my research problem, is that people are anxious in stats classes. A research question is some question whose response would help solve the research problem. So if we have a research question is something that if we answer it, we've got at least a partial solution. So research questions can be broad or they can be narrow. Here I've got a research question that's more narrow than the research problem. The research question is, does sitting in groups rather than rows reduce anxiety for people in stats classes? So I want to find out that, well, in a traditional classroom, people sit in rows and they all face forward and you don't face anybody else in the classroom. You might get to see the back of somebody's head, or if you turn around, you can talk. But if we have people sitting in groups around pods of tables, might that reduce anxiety? So that would be a research question. Now, there's a lot of ways of reducing anxiety in a stats class, and so I could answer different research questions also. But this is one specific research question about sitting in groups rather than sitting in rows. And then a hypothesis is a statement that's either true or false. And if it's true, then it can help provide a solution to the research problem. So it's something that we want to get evidence for or against so that we can say that, this is true, therefore we can use this information to answer our research question. So I can make the hypothesis: students who sit in groups will be less anxious than students who sit in rows. We can compare two groups of people, students that sit in rows and students who sit in groups, and compare these two types of seating arrangements and see if the average level of anxiety is different in the groups. Now, I'm making a directional hypothesis. I'm saying that students who sit in groups will be less anxious than students who sit in rows. So that's the research problem, the research question, and a hypothesis. Here's another example. Here's the problem. Students quickly forget the material presented in stats classes and are not able to do their homework. Everything in class seems fine and dandy. A few days later, they're at home trying to work on the problems, and everything has escaped them and they can't remember anything. So the research question might be what class methods, what teaching methods can be used to increase stats learning? And that's a research question. And a hypothesis, a real specific, so this is a broad research question, but a specific hypothesis is here, and all hypotheses have to be specific. Students who attend a stats class and watch videos will do better on their homework than students who just attend class. So maybe I'll have the students that just attend class and they go do homework, and then I have another set of students who attend class and watch videos that I've made. See if they do better on their homework. That would be the hypothesis and how we would test it. Then I've got some other examples here. Employees often forget to come to department meetings. And the research question could be, why do employees forget to come to department meetings? And emailing an agenda the day before a department meeting will increase attendance. Some of these you look at and say, well, is this going to be a good study or what's going to happen? I'm going to let you evaluate 3 and 4, and we especially want to evaluate the hypotheses. Now, what are the characteristics of a good hypothesis? Well, first of all, it's got to be a response to a research question. So like, does sitting in groups rather than rows reduce anxiety? And it's got to be an answer to the question, and it's got to be in a declarative form, something that's either true or false. So that's the first characteristic. The second characteristic is that it's got a positive relationship between 2 or more variables. So in this one, it's students who sit in groups will be less anxious than students who sit in rows. So the 2 variables are how students sit and anxiety. And it's positing a difference between these 2 groups. So this is like a difference between 2 groups. An example would be you might hypothesize that males and females have different average heights. Those are 2 groups, males and females. People who sit in rows and people who sit in groups are different groups. Or we could posit a relationship that's a correlation. Like, for example, the age and the height of senior citizens. As people get older, they get shorter. Is that true? We've got 2 variables, age and the height of senior citizens, and we're hypothesizing a negative relationship. The older they get, the shorter they get. So we've got to have, that's the second characteristic of a good hypothesis. A third characteristic is that it reflects a theory or a body of literature upon which it's based. It's not, you're just not guessing randomly. There's got to be good reasons for this. And so for in this hypothesis, this comes from the idea of social support, the idea that humans strengthen one another and give each other support and encouragement. And so if we are sitting in groups, they can see each other and have that social support that comes from being with other people that can understand what situation you're in is. So we've got, there's a theory behind why we could make that hypothesis. The hypothesis should be brief and to the point. It should be only 1 sentence. It should be really clear. The variables should be clear. And 5, it's got to be testable. We've got to be able and go out and collect data. We can collect data on how people are sitting, and we know how to measure people's anxiety. We can give them a state anxiety form, and that will help us get our data. So these are characteristics of a good hypothesis. And if the hypotheses don't meet these criteria, they need refining until they are good hypotheses.